If you want to learn Russian to fluency, if you're not willing to completely replace English out of your life, just stop watching right now because you're wasting your time. All right, good morning, guys, or actually good noon, I should say. I am waking up a bit late today. So basically, this is my guide as, like I said earlier, somebody that is doing college based almost full-time and also working full-time plus doing OT and also trying to learn a language to fluency most times. So this is like the complete guide, I would say, for, I guess, my Russian routine, what I do on a normal day. So today's Saturday, so it's not like a normal weekday. I will go through my weekday routine as well. But I'm a big fan of what is called the AJAT method. So basically AJAT, to give a little brief history, All Japanese All the Time was a very popular blog, I don't know, like 15 years ago or something. I'm going to age myself here. And basically it was this guy that was a full-time college student that learned Japanese to like an insane level of fluency within a year, and he kind of shares his guide for doing so. So basically, All Japanese All the Time, AJAT. In this guide, I'm going to reference it as a RAT, All Russian All the Time. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. So the number one thing, and I would not even continue watching this video, if you want to learn Russian to fluency, if you're not willing to completely replace English out of your life, just stop watching right now because you're wasting your time. Like, if you're that reliant on English, don't even watch this video. You're wasting your time. And I say that with all good intentions. There's no purpose of learning a few hundred words in a language just to say, hello, goodbye, and that's it. What's even the point of learning the language at that point? I mean, the natives they're going to speak more English than you will, and that defeats the entire purpose. And that's another big problem, too. I feel like, especially with European languages, English is so prevalent nowadays that a lot of these people are learning English at a very young age. So even if it's classroom only, kind of like how we learn Spanish in the U.S., almost every American knows adios, hola, gracias. So knowing the equivalent phrases in whatever European language you're speaking is literally just a complete waste of your life and a complete waste of time. There's not even a purpose to you pursuing it. Now, if you actually want to become fluent in that language, this is the video for you. So I'm going to be focusing on Russian and basically my techniques for Russian, what I've been doing for Russian. Like I said, most of this video is just to keep me disciplined and on track for what I personally do. I'm going to be vlogging, I guess, my life through this process just to keep myself accountable because I've been kind of slacking off the last few months, and that is unacceptable. So number one, like I said, if you're not willing to replace your native language with your target language, completely replace, then just stop watching or wasting your time. Number two, in order to have the discipline to do something like this, which yes, it does take a lot of discipline, you have to have a good reason. So the initial reason I wanted to learn Russian, not only did I think the language looked cool, but I also wanted to travel throughout Russia, primarily Siberia, and most the places that I want to travel to, people don't speak English. I think the last time I read, statistic-wise, the people that claim to speak fluent English in Russia is like 20%. And a lot of these rural areas, you need to know Russian. And as somebody that's been there, I've been to Georgia, Armenia, some of the ex-Soviet republics. Russian is still, to this day, extremely useful. And there's a lot of places and things that I've been to that if I did not speak Russian, I would not have been able to do. So it opens a lot of doors. And that being said, though, you need to know this because some languages like Icelandic, for example, or Norwegian, which is actually the first language that I wanted to teach myself, once I found out that like 98% of people in Norway speak English, it's kind of a pointless, useless language. It's literally pointless. Icelandic's pretty much pointless. Learning Irish Gaelic's pretty much useless. I'm going to have a clip here of somebody saying why they didn't want to learn Gaelic.
Whenever you leave, 18. So I learned Irish mandatory, had to learn it for 14 years, but I cannot speak Irish. And I hated every single class of Irish that I had. It was awful because I saw no point to it.
So it has to be a useful language. Honestly, I heard somebody say once that learning Chinese was easier than learning Icelandic. A, because there's a lot more resources out there. But B, because people actually used it and it was actually useful. Not saying that people don't use Icelandic, but everybody there also speaks English. So because of that, they kind of pigeonhole their own language. Another reason why, and I probably will start, I'm thinking about doing a 6-month German challenge later. But the reason I wanted to speak Russian over German is because almost everybody in Germany speaks English. kind of making that language useless. So Russian is definitely not that way. I'd say Arabic's probably a good one too. Chinese, Japanese, obviously. The entire template for this video is based off of Japanese. Spanish, French, languages such as that I feel like are very useful. And you have to have enough motivation to want to speak that language to the point where you're completely willing to abandon English. Possibly forever, depending on what you do with this language. So I know that sounds intimidating and scary, but that's kind of the foundation for this method. So AJAT, or ARAT, as I say. What does that mean? So all Russian all the time. Everything you do needs to be in Russian. So let's say, for example, I have a record collection. I like listening to records. Well, guess what? No more English music. It's all Russian now. TV, it's all Russian now. Series, it's all Russian now. So anything that I do, basically outside, obviously if I have to do English for work or for school or anything like that, then yes, I do it when I have to. If I'm in class and I need to write notes, guess what? They're going to be in Russian. Anything that I can do in Russian, I do in Russian. Your computer needs to be in Russian. Your phone needs to be in Russian. Everything needs to be in Russian. Basically, you're trying to make like a Russian safe space for yourself. And this sounds intense, but think about it. You did the same thing when you were learning English, didn't you? Everything around you is English. And this idea that once you get past a certain age, it's impossible to learn a language, statistically, if you look at the facts and the studies, is absolute BS, completely BS. It's just the fact that when you grow up, you have no other choice to learn English. Your brain naturally reverts to whatever it thinks is the easiest. So if it thinks the easiest thing to do is to use English, it's going to use English. But if it doesn't have an option to use English, it's going to be forced to use Russian. It's just like building muscle, for example, right? Like you have to up the weights and go to failure, and if you just do the same thing every week, then you're not going to build muscle. Well, it's the same thing with languages. Exact same thing. Your brain doesn't want to because it knows English is easier for you, but if you force it to learn another language, in this case Russian, it will learn Russian because out of necessity, it has to. So again, right now is still somewhat morning. My weekend, usually first thing I would do is I would wake up, I would go to the gym. The entire time I would go to the gym, which is about an hour. I would listen to Russian music. So that's 1 hour of Russian right there. I would get home. Then I have 2 hours of what I would do, which is SRS. So part of the whole AJAT, or my hijacked a rat method, is this is a program called Anki. And if you're watching this video and you're actually serious about learning Russian, I would download this right now. So basically, this is not for you to learn Russian. This is like a support method, if that makes sense. This is a little bit extra. So the first thing is immersion's number one, right? So getting as much immersion in the language, watching as much Russian, reading as much Russian, listening, speaking even, if you have the opportunity to do so, that's more important than this. So I just want to put an FYI out there. If you read, and I'll link, I think they have since changed the name of the AJAT forum, but I would recommend every single person watching this video to read the table of contents so you know exactly what I'm talking about and the strategies that are listed. I do not agree with everything in that, and I will get in detail with that here. As you can see here, my Anki's in Russian because everything that I do is in Russian except for the words my deck, which I should probably change to my ecoloder or something like that. So this is Anki. And basically what I do is every day, or I should, and I've been losing track of doing this, but add 20 new words to my Anki deck. So basically what I do is I find a word in a sentence, use sentence, you want to use context. Again, this is all outlined in the table of contents that I do not know. I go to the dictionary, and I will make a video on me making cards at some point. And I make 20 sentence cards with words that I do not know. Sometimes I put audio on them, sometimes I don't. With Russian definitions, unless it's a noun, because that can get kind of difficult at times. But try to keep everything in Russian if possible. And then I add those to my deck every day. So Anki is an SRS system, so it spaces out. This is like flashcards, and I actually used to use flashcards. I had like this big bag of like physical flashcards, but once it got past like 1,000, it was like impossible to keep track of. And some of them, like easy words like privyet, hi, I don't need to see that card. I know what that means. Like I'm not going to forget that word. Other words, more difficult words, restauravat, or I think that means like disappointed or something. I mean, that's a more... I'm not going to remember that as easily. I might need to see that a lot more. So if we go to, this is statistics. this will basically shows your Anki record, if that makes sense. And if you're like competitive like me, it's actually kind of cool to keep track of, like which days did I slouch off on, which days did I. So you see, like the darker the blue here, the more cards that I've went through. Days that are blank, I haven't. And like I said, I work overtime almost every day. I pretty much work 10-hour shifts. Plus, I'm also taking 10 credit hours at college right now. So for me to keep track is very difficult. Not making excuses. Again, that's part of the reason I am making this video. So if I go to my deck here, Uchit, to learn basically, to study, and this is my card. Bog So this is actually a Bible verse right here. And there's guides to these. The purpose of this video isn't to go through Anki, but basically when I get home, I go to the gym, I listen to Russian music for 1 hour, and then I usually do Anki for about an hour. So this is like to ignore, I think. And again, you want to think in Russian. I'm saying English just because I'm assuming most people watching this video do not speak Russian yet. So, but so basically not worthy of their own, which is like attention. So I got that one right. So I would do this for about an hour. Sometimes it takes less, and if I'm keeping track, it usually takes less. So this right here would probably take me like 20-30 minutes. Afterwards, I would start adding cards. So this is to add cards, front, back. I would have basically a sentence up front, and then I would have a Russian definition with the one word in the sentence that I do not know in the back. So that's what I would do. So before you get into Anki, though, and something that is not going to be mentioned with the whole AJAT method or ARAT method, I would personally get some sort of like intro to Russian textbook. So first thing you need to do is you need to learn the actual alphabet, obviously. And compared to like a Spanish or a German or something, most English speakers, at least native English speakers, are not going to know what any of these words mean. Don't worry, the alphabet in Russian, in my mind, is probably the easiest thing to learn. I mean, it's going to take you, I think it took me an hour to learn the entire alphabet. It's not very difficult at all. But if you get a textbook, you're going to learn that real quick. I would just get some sort of intro college level. I got like some cheapy, like art fair, like the library book sale used. It was like 50 cents or something from like the 80s. It doesn't matter. The Russian language is the Russian language. You know, if it's from the textbooks from the 70s or 80s, it really doesn't matter. And I would go through that entire textbook, and I would treat it like your life depends on it. During COVID, obviously, I had a lot more time to do this. I would spend 12 hours a day grinding through every single exercise. I made actual physical flashcards. So before you do sentence cards, you need to know at least some of the basic words, or else you're not going to have enough to use sentences for context. So every single word that is in that textbook, you need to know. Every word. So some sort of intro to Russian book. I would learn every single word. Actually, I have my recommendation here. This book is called Live from Russia. It's actually the book that a lot of the Ivy League, like the Harvards and stuff, use for the Russian program. I actually think this is like kindergarten stupid basic, which I don't know if that makes me really smart or makes this book really bad or actually really good, because, I don't know, maybe it does a better job teaching because of that. But basically, if I go to the back here, there's like an index of words, I guess. Like every single one of these words, I should easily know what they mean. Every single one of these. And actually, I pretty much do. So that is something, I would even make physical flashcards if you had to. Make sure you know all the words. Go through all the lessons. Now, do not focus on grammar. I think that's a big mistake that a lot of people do. Do not focus on grammar. What you want to do is focus on vocab. You knew English before you learned English grammar. That's true. Most people did not start off with English grammar. I don't know why, for some odd, stupid reason, in American schools, we start with grammar first. It's absolutely stupid. So don't necessarily get hung up on the grammar. You need to be aware of it, though. So Russian is very conjugation heavy, extremely conjugation heavy. Compared to AJAT, we don't have to learn kanji, which is nice, and the alphabet's not bad at all. Actually, I kind of prefer the Russian alphabet to the English alphabet, but you need to not get crazy with the grammar. In fact, I have a chart of all the grammar rules here, all the spelling rules, and I still don't necessarily have this by memory. I'm kind of at the point where it just sounds right, so I do it. So Russian has a case system, and I might make an entire separate video just towards the case system. But that is not something I would necessarily focus on too much. You just need to be aware of it. For example, and there are a couple sounds too in Russian that are pretty difficult to pronounce. In my mind, the definition of fluency is I can speak and somebody understands me. For example, the letter U, I think I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am. E and U. A lot of English speakers have a difficulty pronouncing that, me included. And I'm definitely not perfect by any means. And that is also that is the genitive case. So, for example, stakan vada is now stakan vadu. Because you have to conjugate it properly. But again, that is for another video. You just need to be aware of these rules and what they are. Same thing with verb conjugations. They're very similar to Spanish, actually extremely similar to Spanish or French. So if you've taken like a Romance language in the past, which I'm assuming most people have at least taken a class or two of, it would not be very difficult for you to understand. So for example, gavarit, which means to speak. Ya gavryu, I speak. I wouldn't say ya gavrit, I would say ya gavryu. Gavriyu, Gavrish, Gavritya, Gavrim. You should know all these by memory. Again, it's going to be included in the textbook. It's not that complicated to learn. Russian has a lot of really weird rules. And the reason Russian is so difficult isn't necessarily, it's not the alphabet at all. It's just the way everything's conjugated. The grammar, I think, is very difficult, especially for an English-speaking person to understand. So anyway, that's enough of that. I'm getting off on a sidetrack here. Learn the basic rules. Learn the alphabet. Go through the textbook like your life depends on it. So if you're working full-time, if you only have a few hours a day, my recommendation, choose a chapter, grind through it, do the best you can, and I'll get through my day routine here pretty soon, exactly what I do. But afterwards, after you get through that, then I would go full-time on Anki. So again, the entire reasoning for all this is immersion. Immersion's number one. I actually have an MP3 player here. Like old style MP3 player. I was able to get this on Amazon or something like that. The reason why I have an MP3 player and I don't use my phone is because I don't want distractions. I really like traveling. Obviously, that's the entire purpose of this channel. That's the reason why I'm learning a language, is because I like to travel. I downloaded a bunch of travel podcasts in Russian on my MP3 player. If I go on a walk or if I'm doing something long or whatever I'm doing, if I'm vacuuming my apartment, doing laundry, whatever, I listen to my MP3 player because it's in Russian. I have to listen to it. I can't, flicker around. It's not distracting like my phone is. So that's the entire reason I have this. You can pick one of these up for like $5-10. By the way, you do not need to spend money to learn a language. That kind of makes me mad. I feel like you should not have to pay money to learn a language. That is a right that every human has. So this is, again, like $5-10 on Amazon. Pick it up if you want. I definitely feel like it's worth the money, but you definitely do not need to spend money. Same thing with the textbook. I'm sure you can get some sort of e-textbook or learn something. The Russian government actually has a lot of good resources for free online. You do not necessarily have to spend money, but in my mind, like $20 for a textbook, $5 for an MP3 player, and that's really all you need. At least that's what I would recommend. So that is that, and basically immersion's number one. You use Anki as support, 20 brand new words a day, and all day try to get as much immersion as you can. So basically right now, like I said, wake up in the morning, gym for an hour, Russian music while I'm in the gym. That way I'm still doing Russian. I'm still adhering to the 8-rap method. I get home, 1 hour for Anki review, 1 hour to add Anki cars. Now I'm at 3 hours. So that's 3 hours of Russian. I'm not even at work yet. Go to work. So when I'm at work, I get a 30-minute lunch break. I get 2 15-minute breaks. I work a 10-hour shift usually. Some nights I have classes. I have to stay a little late. I actually have a full work schedule written up somewhere around here, but I'm not going to bore you with that. So basically, those 30 minutes and those 2 15 minutes, I'm actually a big fan of reading manga. This is from the AJAP method, but using it in the ARAP method. So for manga, there is an app called Manga Lib, Lib, which I imagine is short for library. I have it up on my phone here, Manga Lib, and it's a free manga app. It's all in Russian. You don't need a VPN or anything, and I can go through. And the cool thing about manga, what I like, is not only am I learning Russian, first thing, if I don't understand something, because of all the pictures, it's almost like a picture book. So I can understand through context. For example, there was one of the mangas I was reading, somebody was farting, and then there was the Russian word for fart. When he was farting, I did not have to look up that word because I could understand through context what that word meant. It's just like the same way you learn English when you're a kid. Just think of this entire method is based off of how you learn English when you're a kid. So that is what I like to do when I'm at work. So I read Russian for 1 hour at work, basically. So right now that is up to 4 hours. I go home. Before I go to bed, I watch a Russian TV show. Major is my favorite one right now. Strongly recommend. And you can go online. I'm not going to list websites. I don't know necessarily how legal this is. Netflix has a lot of shows. I don't know if they still do, but at least they did in Russian. That's another good resource. Crunchyroll is another good one. If you have a Russian VPN or Belarusian or Georgian or anything Eastern Europe, you can get the Russian dub for a lot of things. I would also recommend that. But yeah, there's a lot of Russian versions of Putlocker where you can get a lot of Russian TV shows for free. On YouTube, there's a ton of amazing channels that I like watching. Ludi is a really good one that I like watching that I strongly recommend. So I try to watch Russian for 1 hour after I get home from work, and this is around midnight, 1 in the morning, something like that. Go to bed, rinse and repeat. So that is my average Russian routine. I think if you count all that up, that is about 5 hours a day while being a full-time college student. So if I do have a college night, basically what happens is I clock out of work in the middle of the night. Almost all my classes are night classes. I come back, I have to stay up late to make up the hours. If I have to write notes for my class, they're in Russian. My classes usually last for an hour or two. And I would not say it really necessarily hinders too much my Russian progress at all in any way. If you want something enough, then I think I'm definitely in the mindset you will find a way to do it. So that is my Russian routine. And again, I'm making the entire purpose of this video is to hold myself accountable. So I will be basically doing a vlog probably every week or so, just tracking the results of this experiment. And we will see what happens. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. And do встречи.